2004.
Bila 2004, sayang, be specific.
1st January.
1st January of 2004. Right, excellent. How many volumes are there in the IMDG code?
Two volumes.
Sorry?
2 volumes.
2 volumes. Drish, how many parts are there in the IMDG code?
Seven parts.
7 parts. Excellent. Dup, dup, dup. We got that. We got, oh yes, I have another question. Oh my. Wait. This is a really good question. So what's the name of that UN body that developed the Orange Book, also known as the Recommendation for the Transportation of Dangerous Goods?
Is it UN Economic and Social Council?
Yeah, but the committee is known as UN Committee of Experts on the Transport of Dangerous Goods. Yeah, the Economic Social Council is the big body. Under that is the UN Committee of Experts. Yeah, for the, because there are a lot of UN Committee of Experts. These guys are the experts for the road transport of, of the transport of dangerous goods. Yeah. And so we've got that, we've got IMO, we've covered SOLAS, MARPOL, we've covered the versions of the code, we've covered when does the code become mandatory, we've covered how many volumes there are, we covered the version that you are currently doing, and now we move to the first part of the code book. Okay. All right, so I'm going to screen share. So while I screen share, I would request that all of you open part 1 as well. So that is general provisions, definition, and training. Open that portion. Now that is the first part of your code book. And before I share my screen, I'm showing you on the camera how the code book looks like, and the first part. So there will be parts where I will hold the book up to the camera to show you certain things. Okay. All right, so let's get the screen share happening. And we begin as usual by going through the objectives of this lesson. This lesson's objectives are, you would be able to list the parts of the IMDG code book. That means you actually know which part is what. And in some of our exam questions, we actually test you on that for you to list out the parts of the code book so that you know where to navigate into. Explain the role, its role in the SOLAS and MARPOL convention. That means the role of the code in the SOLAS and MARPOL conventions. Indicate the parts related to training and a part related to security provisions, because training and security provisions are relatively new subparts into part 1 that were put in, like training came in version 3510, and security provisions also came at the same part, 3510. It came in after 9/11, so we will see that. State the national competent authority regulating the code in Malaysia and identify the parties responsible and complying with the code. So when you open this book and you open the first, I would say, after they give you the contents and all that of the code book, in the forward, this is the forward of the code book, and you see these like bullet points and all that. So generally, before you start reading the book, what these bullet points are doing is they're indicating to you in this new version 3918, which area of the code books, when you see this bullet, this full block bullet in, it means something new has been inserted in this version. When you see this circle and the X sign, it means that something has been deleted in the version. And when you see the triangle sign, it means something has changed. They have changed some things in the code book. The other thing that the code begins, because the code is a set of rule and guidelines, so which means it will be worded in legal language. That is why you need training, because a lot of the language in there is legal English. And in legal English, they will use words like shore-based personnel shall be trained and certified in this following area. So whenever they use the word shall in legal English, shall means mandatory. That means wajib. You have to get that done. Then the word should means recommendatory. That means digalakkan. And the word may means optional. That means up to you. You want to use or you don't want to use. It's completely up to the country, the state, or whoever, the shipper that is, that is involved in the movement. So how does it look like? Let me just show you. Because I think many of you didn't print out the DGL in your attachments. So that is why I have to physically show you this thing. So I'm trying to open up a page where I will open volume 2. And in volume 2, I will open the DGL. That will show you this. Now, this is the DGL, and you will see some bullets. Do you see these bullets? Let me take a look at you guys. I want to see your faces. Okay, do you see these bullets at the end of the page, at the beginning of the page? Now, these bullets are indicating something new has been inserted, right? There. So these are the new UN numbers that have come in. This is just one of the new things that I'm showing you. So there are about a number of UN numbers that have come in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 new UN numbers were introduced in version 3980. Also, you will notice the triangle sign here. I show you again. Do you see the triangle right at the corner of the UN number? Because most parts of the code book in the earlier version, they use the word risk. Now that word risk has been changed with the word hazard. So you'll find this triangle virtually everywhere, okay? And the deletion comes in when you look at special provisions, which is also in your attachments. So tomorrow, please, I have all your attachments in your hand, yeah, when you join the training. So it's easier for us to refer, because from tomorrow onwards, we'll be going more in depth. So in special provisions, let me just show you what I mean. Special provisions will list out, there are some special provisions that have come out of the code book. They are no longer there. And special provisions is in volume 2, part 3.3 of the code book. You have to navigate yourself there. I'll show you one page. Yeah. Okay. Can you see the circle? Do you see the circle with the cancel thing in it? That means these things have been removed from the code book, yeah? Like 183. Tomorrow when you print out the SP, we'll run through again. So you will see the differences. So in the code book, of course, the first part always begins with this. It begins with first giving you the general provisions, meaning they tell, we know the code is required for seafarers, right? Obviously, seafarers will need the code. But it's also required out of shore-based personnel. That means us, people who are on the shore. Why? Because the highest responsibility in compliance to the code resides in the shipper. The shipper is the most responsible person. So that's why the code extends to the shore side. However, when you open the code in part 1, general provisions, they are talking about the types of ships that the code applies to. So what size vessels, what year vessels, and so on, that is in your 1.1 general provisions. In the 1.2, they go about giving you a description of definitions of certain terms that are used, like cargo transport units. What are cargo transport units? So these are defined. Certain abbreviations that are used, you know, like what does bags mean? What do barge carrying ships mean? What does bulk mean? And what does elevated temperature mean? What does ro-ro mean? You know, some of you may not even know what a ro-ro ship is. So there's a whole bunch of definitions in 1.2 of the code book. And when you move on to, see, this is what the general provision looks like, just so you get to see it. With my screen, I have all of you. I move up. The provisions of this code apply to all ships registered under SOLAS Convention 74, carrying DG as defined in Regulation 1 of Part A of Chapter 7 of the Convention, because packaged dangerous goods is under Part A. Regulation 2-19 of the Convention applies for passenger and cargo ships. So this is for ships. Passenger ships constructed blah blah blah, cargo ships of so much tonnage, and so on and so forth, says that this code is now applicable for that. Then, because there are these two major conventions that I told you about, the SOLAS and the MARPOL conventions, so in 1.1 of part 1 of the code, it will indicate the parts of SOLAS convention that refer to the IMDG code, like Regulation 1 will cover definition. Regulation 2 of Part 1 of Part A covers application. Regulation 3 covers the requirement for carriage of DG. Regulation 4 covers documentation. So in the documentation under SOLAS, they even talk about the container packing certificate. All right, and Regulation 5 is about cargo securing manual. Regulation 6 is reporting of incidents involving DG. So there are 5 regulations under Chapter 7, Part A of the SOLAS Convention that is indicated in Part 1.1 of the IMDG Code book. Immediately after that comes the MARPOL Convention. So they give you Annex 3, the first chapter, Regulation 1, which is again definition, Regulation 2, application, Regulation 3, the packing, Regulation 4, the marking, you know, the dead fish and the dead tree symbol, Regulation 5, the documentation, that means declaring that the substance is a marine pollutant, Regulation 6, this is for the storage planners on where to store this, Regulation 7 on quantity limitations, Regulation 8 on exceptions, Regulation 9 on port state control and operational requirements, and then the Chapter 2 on the same annex, which is the compliance with provisions of the annexes. So this comes in the first part of the code book. And when we're talking about packaged dangerous goods, may I remind you, we're talking about containers. And containers have their own convention. That means when containerization became popular, the International Maritime Organization with the Economic Commissions of Europe, they undertook a study to come up with guidelines to ensure that these containers were always safe for usage and that the seaworthiness are constantly maintained by giving maintenance and inspection programs. That convention is called the International Convention for Safe Containers. So the International Convention for Safe Containers is also incorporated in Part 1.1 from the code book. I will cover this separately in Part 7. This convention itself is a part module of this course, which we will cover. Also, in Part 1.1, 1.1.3, specifically, the code describes dangerous goods forbidden for transport. So they will tell you what are the kind of products that are forbidden for transport. These are usually, if you remember the video that I played you in the morning, where they spoke about goods that are regulated, that are forbidden, regulated, and that are non-regulated. So the goods that are forbidden, they fall on the top of the pyramid. These are government to government agreements, yeah? And then, yes, the 1 point, this is the definitions, regulation 1 of the SOLAS Convention, where they define what are dangerous goods. And this is regulation 2 of the SOLAS Convention, chapter 7, that talks about the application. That means what kind of ships and what does not apply. This is the document, transport information related to the carriage of DG in package form. So this is your declaration form, your multimodal DG form, and the container vehicle packing certificate shall be in accordance with the relevant provisions of the code. So this tells you that the port state authority manage. So for us, the Klang, we who are using Westport, Northport, we are lucky. LPK is managing this pretty well for us, yeah? They make sure that we are in full compliance of the code by giving the CPC registration numbers. That's why they make you do an exam, another exam. This is 1.2, definition, units of measurements, and list of abbreviations. And this is the training requirement. So the training requirement, when it comes to seafarers, they will refer to this. This is called STCW. STCW is the Seafarers Training and Certification and Watchkeeping. It's a professional, it is a skills training program for seafarers. So within that, under the STCW also, it says that the IMDG code is also valid for them. That means they also need to do the IMDG code, which is actually part of the STCW. And they talk about shore-based personnel. So when it comes to shore-based personnel, the training is divided into general awareness, function-specific, and safety training. Now, the safety training is recommendatory, but these are the 2 ones that we're having. And the periodical refresher training. So from the version 3918, the refresher training, when you come back in, is the entire function-specific program. So you come back into the entire function-specific program, though we are trying to negotiate with Marine Department to make that a bit shorter. We will keep you posted. This is the STCW. I'm going to pass this by. All right, but what I want you to see is the code describes in 1.1, in 1.3, they give you a table and they say this, and I'm going to read this out to you, okay? It says that shore-based personnel engaged in the transport of DG that is intended to be transported by sea have to be trained in the contents. It says shall be trained. So kita dah tahu shall in legal English means must be trained in the contents of the dangerous goods provisions commensurate with their responsibilities. And then they identify the training should be classified DG and identify proper shipping names, pack dangerous goods, mark labels, pretty much all the parts of the code booklet. They mention it based on the competence that is required. And then they break it to the general awareness and the function specific. But when they come to the function specific, they break the functions. What you see on your screen looks like this. You see this? There are 13 functions indicated there. So the second level is the function specific. It starts with classify dangerous goods. These are for lab techs. Then moves on to pack dangerous goods. These are the package manufacturers or the manufacturing company where they are doing the packing and filling of receptacles. Then the number 5, mark, label, and placard. And number 4, load, unload cargo transport unit. So we take these specific functions, 13, we incorporate them into a function specific that is either packing containers, there's one function, loading ships is another function, yeah, for port operators and terminals. So there are various, these are the functions that they are referring to. Yeah, and these are the parts of the code that you need to learn. In part 1.4 of the code book is the security provisions. The security provisions came about only after 9/11 occurred. So when 9/11 occurred, it was one of the most scariest incidences in global trade, because the financial districts were in New York itself and the World Trade Center, and everything totally wiped out during that whole terrorism act in that period of time. So when that happened, I was working, and I remember very well that first and foremost, we couldn't even book shipments out. It was sort of like COVID-19 situation, because even in COVID-19, the global supply chains just stopped. So in this period or so, global supply chains did stop, but most of the emphasis of the stoppages were for cargoes going to the US. And we had to get we had to get companies, third-party companies, to actually examine what was in the container, and that had to be declared on the bill of lading. So cargoes destined for the US, their bill of ladings could not have said to contain. They had to have contains. So that was part of the requirement. And then soon, very soon, this came in, because a large number of dangerous goods are actually used for weapons of mass destruction. So this was introduced in all the different provisions and guidelines for the different modes of transport of dangerous goods. In IMDG Code, they put it under part 1.4. You can see for IATA is 1.6. In the RID is 1.10. In the ADN is 110. And the ADR is 110. So what this is about is they have listed, that means the committee of experts in the transport of dangerous goods, they've listed, you see all these classes and certain UN numbers and packaging types. They listed these items as the sensitive items that have a potential for misuse for terrorism incident. So each country has to manage it depending on how much of this, based on the list of classes, how much of it is moving in and out of the country. So in Malaysia, we do this for explosives. We control explosives. We class 1 cargo, we control class 7, though you don't see 7 listed here. 7 has a separate provision altogether. And one of the most important things is 5.1, ammonium nitrate based fertilizers or emulsions or suspensions. These things are known to be one of the favorite items for these terrorist groups. In fact, a couple of years back, I think, was it a couple of time passes so fast, 2 years ago or 3 years ago, in one of the training sessions, I remember this happened, that a ship was caught, a Malaysian ship, flagship, was caught on the coast of Indonesia, unloading unregistered, unmanifested, unloading ammonium nitrate based fertilizers. So it's kind of scary. You wonder what that is going to be used for. So the security provisions have come in to ensure that for certain types of products like this ammonium nitrate based fertilizers, carriers won't even accept the bookings if you're shipping them out in portable tanks in large quantities, unless you get something called a certificate of acceptance. So the certificate of acceptance, you obtain that from, of course, from Jabatan Laut, from Marine Department of Malaysia, but the process starts with MIFI. This falls under the Strategic Trade Act, STA. So you have to, it's like coming up with an ERP. Let me show you. Oh, I don't have the whole thing here. It's coming up. We covered this in intensity in level 2, in function specific. But what is required here is you have to come up with an entire response plan on not just indicating what kind of DGs you are moving, the quantities you are moving, the methods you move them. That means kalau ada intermodalism, multimode, what are the multimodes? What is the route that is taken for this cargo? How much is moved in a year? Who are the people that are in the security team? That means you only have a certain number of people that are involved in the movement of these goods, the supply chain of these goods. And these goods are usually not, you won't even see any markings or stuff on them because you don't want people to know that these goods are moving and you don't want them to be heisted. So it is a massive plan that you need to come up with. It's like an emergency response plan where you take your risk into account, you identify your risks, you rank them, you come up with mitigation tools, and you have a committee that manages the entire security plan when it comes to movement of these kind of goods. So we have security provisions there. And actually, the code doesn't end telling you who the National Competent Authority. This is what we put in our part 1 to immediately tell you who the custodian of this rule is. So this is an international regulation, right? Using the IMDG code according to the SOLAS in Malaysia, you know, has ratified the SOLAS. So the custodian in Malaysia, that means who is the party, the government agency in Malaysia that communicates with IMO. That party is known as our Jabatan Laut Malaysia or Malaysian Marine Department. Now, details of all this is actually obtainable in part 7. That means the final part of the code book. 7.9 will list down all the national competent authorities all around the world that are signatories to the SOLAS Convention and who have to follow the guidelines and the provisions of the code. But I put it here out front for you because sometimes by the time we get to the 7th part, you kind of get really tired and people don't usually pay attention to this portion of it. So always remember that they are the regulators, they are not the enforcers, my friend. Enforcers of the code are the local port authorities where the goods are going to get on board the ship. So the enforcer for us in Selangor is our LPK. In Penang will be Penang Port Commission. In Johor will be Johor Port Authority, and so on and so forth. Okay, so who uses the code? Virtually anyone and everyone who is involved in the supply chain. That means if you're involved in the supply chain logistics of these goods moving at every level of the supply chain, whether you are a manufacturer, packer, shipper, trader, or whatever, the code then becomes relevant to you. And you cannot turn around, like you cannot say that I'm just a forwarding agent, I only do forwarding, I don't need to know. You need to know. By virtue of the fact when you have accepted these kind of dangerous goods, you are accepting the liabilities that are tied up to these goods. So which means that you are responsible to ensure that the party that you pick the goods up from are fully compliant to the rules and regulation of the goods. So everyone needs to know, in other words. And that brings us to the end of my slide share. All right, now do you all have any questions at all to throw back at me? Let's see what we're doing with time. Oh, we've actually got another hour to go, but I'm not going to cover the part 2. I'm not going to cover the part 2 today. I will do the part 2 tomorrow. So today though, let's just touch back on what we have learned. Now we've already covered up the 2 major conventions, SOLAS and MARPOL, and where in these 2 conventions tell us to use the code. We know the code is published by IMO, International Maritime Organization. And we know that the code became mandatory. That means the whole world who signed the SOLAS Convention had to follow the rules and regulations of that code from the 1st of January of 2004. right? And the training and certification bit only came in 6 years later, only in 2010. All right. Before that, it was just that you follow the code. Then they found out that people were not following it because they didn't understand it. So they made training and certification mandatory to make sure that people were trained in it and won't know how to use it. We also know that the code actually consists of 2 volumes and a supplement guide. Supplement guide is not for you guys, it is for the seafarers. But what you need is the volume 1 and the volume 2. They are required because it is your point of reference. You also know that your national competent authority that regulates the code in Malaysia is Jabatan Laut Malaysia, and they are the issuing body for the certificate. That means when you finish the exams, you pass everything, they are the party that will give you the certification. All right, it's a national certification. We also know the versions of this code, meaning that you are aware now that this code gets updated every 2 years. That means if you get trained in 3918 and 4020 comes up, you cannot say, oh, okay, I know 3918, I don't need to do 4020. Tabole la. You have to do 4020. Why? Because every time this code comes in, there's an update. Either new UN numbers come in, or because you must understand the world is now depending on so much of all this fake stuff. Fake stuff means chemical substitutes, right? And a lot of these chemical substitutes are new items that are coming in. In the lab, when they test it, in the lab, when they test it in a controlled environment, you know. It is not like in a transit. In transit, anything can happen. You have trucks banging against each other, people dropping goods, heat changing, you know, temperature changing throughout transit, open to rain or all that. So when the cargo actually goes in transit is when you actually understand the behavior of the cargo. So when a new product is introduced and it comes into the market, maybe they gave it a UN number and a PSN and a hazard identification for it. And only they actually know how the thing behaves when it's in transit. So when it's in transit, suddenly they find out, oh, I first tested in the lab, it appeared to be a flammable liquid, but turns out this is not a flammable liquid, because in transit, what's happening is it is heating up, forming into polymers, and it is releasing gases. So then that means it's not a flammable liquid. This must be a polymerizing substance, right? So the codes get updated for these reasons. Sometimes packaging, they think that, oh, this could be the packaging for the cargo. But then suddenly in transit, they find out that the package is not strong enough. Then they come back to the drawing board and they say, oh, no, we've done an investigation. We've tested, this is not the right package. And this should be the packaging for the cargo. So that's why we need to be updated whenever the code gets updated. And that's why your certification also, meaning that when you get your cert expires like on 1st of January 2021, you know, because you all are coming in late. You should have come in early. If you come in early, you have longer validity of your certificates. So which means that within that 6 months from January 2021 to June 2021, you have to get yourself trained in the new version. Yeah, the longer you take, the shorter your period of your certification. Okay, so we learned that today. We also know that the IMDG code is specific for packaged dangerous goods. Yeah, and it is for sea transport. And there are types of ships that we can take them on. Of course, container ship, obviously. And then there's general cargo ships as well. General cargo ships takes containers and cargo in package form. They have got derricks on the deck of the ship, like cranes to pick things on either from a barge or from the wharf side onto the ship or off the ship. Then there's also these kind of ships called ro-ro ships, roll-on, roll-off ships. These are car carriers. And because now the global supply chains for automation or automotives, they are like broken in every country. Every country is assembling cars nowadays. So these ships that carry cars have become less popular because every country is assembling their cars. So what to do with these ships? put containers on them. So nowadays, Ro-Ro ships are also taking containers. So that's why the code also says, oh yeah, you will be using Ro-Ro ships from time to time. There's also passenger ships. So we can put, of course, now I don't think anybody after this COVID-19, I never liked going on cruises, never liked being stuck on a big ship with tons of people in the middle of the sea. I would have committed suicide in 3 days already. But imagine now post-COVID, and you all heard about that Diamond Princess and how long those poor people were stuck on that ship. Oh my God. So even sometimes these passenger ships, just like passenger aircrafts, they carry freight as well. So some DG can be loaded on passenger ships. So we'll learn about that. Sometimes you have barges. So, and the funny thing now, when you saw the SOLAS documentation, you saw the word container and vehicle packing certificate. Yes? So you're wondering, hey, vehicle, that's weird, but that happens, okay? So just to put the final touches to the session, again, I have to use my hands, okay? So there you go. Now the thing is right in front. So this is important, CTU, cargo transport unit, very important, okay? Now in CTU, I'm going to give you examples. You have to remember this. Examples of CTUs, containers, portable tank. Portable tank is what? ISO tank. We like to call it an ISO tank. All right. The proper word for it is portable tank, because these are large tanks that can be moved around. You can put it on a truck. You can put it on the ship. You can put it on the train. You can put it on the ground. So they're portable. Same goes with containers. You can put them on the train, put them on the truck, put them on the ship, and put them on the ground, right? So containers, portable tanks, trucks are also, lorries are also considered a CTU, because it's a cargo, it's a unit where cargo can be transported on. It's a huge unit, you pack cargo in, and the fellow moves, all right? So it's a cargo transport unit. So trucks, any type of truck, open truck, closed truck, tanker truck, whatever truck you can virtually dream of is a CTU. And so is the train, the rail wagon. So rail wagon and tank. And for trucks, and you also have road tankers. These are all CTUs, all right? So the container, or CPC is also a VPC, vehicle packing certificate. Because in certain countries, the whole truck goes onto the Ro-Ro ship, which is already packed with the cargo. And then the ship moves that truck from one country to another country. Then the ship reaches the other country, drives out, and boom, it goes. In Europe, these kind of things happen. Yeah, so that's why I haven't seen a train on a truck or on a ship. I haven't seen that. I have seen a part of a train in an airplane. I've seen that. So these are like parts of trains, of the not the locomotive head, the wagons, the behind portions of the train. They move sometimes when you have to move them from country to country. You won't put them on an airplane. Of course, it happens for emergency cases, but they are carried in this manner. That's why when they say CTU, they mean all these things, okay? So you learned that, and tomorrow, let's see how we're doing. Do you have, now put your mics on, and I want to know whether you all have, how has it been for you today? I also want to know your experiences on this online, and I want some feedback from you. Come on, guys, put your mics on and talk to me now. Because I will only be able to make the session better with feedback here. So if you feedback to me, is the only way I get to improve. So how has it been so far? Are you all okay?
Yep.
Is it peculiar from your normal face-to-face sessions?
Yeah.
Slightly.
slightly peculiar because you have to stare at the screen.
Yeah.
And one of the things is it's very difficult to bond, right? But remember that you guys can still bond in a virtual environment. You can still communicate with each other during the short breaks that we have or in the chat portion. All right. And connectivity is one of the biggest issue here. Yeah. So I think for those of you who had issues getting online and all that, I hope tomorrow we won't have this problem. So you know how to get in. Please understand now, you see on your screen, Jabatan Loud is there, right? You see them? They won't show their face, they won't turn on their mics, but they will always be there looking at us. And they want to be able to ensure that if they, even though we do an exam, they want to ensure that you set through. Because I could cow team with you all about the exam and allow you all to cheat and all that, right? Of course I won't, but I mean, it could happen, right? So they want to make sure that you are attending the course. The only way they can see that is if they see you. So that's why your video is very important. Any questions?
You have a recording of this session?
Yes, I'm recording this session.
So can we have a view after this?
Yeah, I will see how I can share. I have recorded, because I have to record for Marine Department, though it's in bits and pieces. I will share the recording in our, I will put it in on my, then it'll go on my YouTube channel, but I'll put it on our YouTube channel. Yeah, I know, because if you go to my YouTube channel, you'll see one other class I had, and then the whiteboard falling on me, and all sorts of joke. My husband had a big laugh. He said, can't you prepare before your class? I'm like, I like to be the teacher clown. Anyways, I'll put this on the YouTube channel, and I will share the link with you all. Okay?
Yeah.
So you can go through this. But please today do me the favor, download everything in the attachments. And if you need to print it out, keep it where you can assess it for tomorrow's session. Because tomorrow's session will be using the DGL and all that, yeah? Okay, and I think there are 4 or 5 pages of the DGL for you to download and have a good look. DGL, special provisions, you go to part 3, you will see the special provision list that out as well, yeah? And yeah, that should be sufficient for tomorrow, the DGL and the special provision. Okay? Any other questions? Because we are we have a few more minutes. If you have anything to share or anything to ask, I will keep this place open. If not, I will close it in a short while. Are you all...
I had to go and see all the quizzes.
All right, your quiz now, when you go to exam button, when you click the exam button, you will see there's a bunch of list of tests and exams available, right?
Okay.
But you cannot attempt them because there's a time, like for the trial exam also there's a timing, but there's a quiz there, and I believe the quiz I have set it for you to already start now if you want to. But remember, we have given you 3 times to run this quiz. I probably will activate 5 to 6 times. I will now go back and do some changes so you can do like 5, 6 times. So you will test yourself, see how you answer. But you only know very little today. So testing yourself from now on may not be that perfect. But yeah. Another thing is maybe Nanmuli needs to put the mic on when you're talking to people. Now, when we have a training session, remember the training session is like when you are in the classroom. Huh? You cannot be answering phones all, okay? Itu semua tidak boleh dibuatkan. Yeah? That's the problem when you do the training in the office. You end up somebody kacauing you.
Yeah.
So you got to find a quiet spot somewhere where nobody will kacau you. Otherwise, they are paying money to send you for training for nothing. Buang duit saja. Kan? Right or not? Okay.
Yeah, what to do?
Any other? What to do? All right. Any other questions? No?
No.
No. All right. Shall we end the session for today?
Yep.
Okay. I'll see you tomorrow morning, 8:30.
Thank
To
you.
get online and all that. All right. Bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you and bye-bye.